One of the things we were curious about too is that if there is a desire to report, what does that process look like from actually filing the complaint, and then how does it unfold? And then what are some of the outcomes typically from Title IX investigations, and however they choose to resolve those?
So, okay, starting with the reporting. So at whatever institution, K through college, graduate school, whatever it is, a school that's handling terminal degrees, should post information that tells people at their institution how to report. So usually what that looks like is they will list the people that they will list people that have been specifically identified that people can report to. So for example, every institution has a Title IX coordinator, or you can also report to what's often called a deputy Title IX coordinator. And what that is it's other folks at the institution, and I say institution, but I mean school. I guess I'll just say school in general, even though people could think K through 12 institution also. But basically, deputy coordinators are trained folks who are also there to be a service to the school and to the folks, the students and the employees, where they're a resource for students and employees to report. So those are the folks that should be listed, but technically you can report to any staff member at the institution. If it's K through 12, if you have something to report, you need to go to anyone comfortable who works for that institution. And by law, that person has to pass on that information. And otherwise, it's a little bit different in college, but most colleges will handle it that way. They will say you go to any adult, any person in any sort of employee role and report, and then it will be reported to the Title IX coordinator or the dean of students or whomever can take action.
Carolyn, just really quickly, does that
Yep.
relate to mandatory reporting? Because I know
Yeah,
that all staff members within a school are mandated reporters. So is it kind of the same principle?
it is. And everyone in a K through 12 system, including bus drivers, volunteers, people in the cafeteria, anyone is a mandatory reporter K through 12. And they should all be trained to know that they are mandatory reporters, and therefore once they are on any sort of notice that there has been discrimination or sexual misconduct or whatever it is, it needs to be reported up per se, okay? It's different now in college. It used to be that everyone was a mandatory reporter except confidential counselors on campus who were designated that way, where students knew that they could go to that person for confidential assistance. If any of you are familiar with the new regs, there's been new Title IX law put in place on May 6th, and it's called the Final Rule. And so there have been several changes to Title IX since that came out. One of them is that colleges don't have to have everyone as a mandatory reporter like they used to, but the college can choose to do that, which Colorado Mountain College has chosen to do that. But unfortunately, now not everyone is a mandatory reporter at a college. Also, in terms of reporting, counselors, we can talk about that for a minute quick. So a college can still have confidential reporting where a student can go to a counselor and talk with them. And it doesn't necessarily have to be reported up. That relationship starts with the counselor, and then they can decide the best way to progress. In K through 12, it does still have to be reported, even though it's been reported to a counselor. Now, the specifics and everything don't have to be reported, right? But that notice was provided to us that something happened does have to be reported. And just because something is reported does not mean that this person, the student, has to go through a formal investigation or even any sort of formal process, frankly. The student has the right to decide that, or if they're K through 12, their parents technically have the right to decide that. But it's important for folks to know that just because they report, it doesn't mean that the police are going to be called. And it doesn't mean that they're going to have to go through some, formal, rigorous investigation. It just starts a process where we can start to support that student or that person. Yeah, so that's the reporting. And then in terms of outcomes, basically, well, it depends on a million things, but you guys, I'm sure, know federal law, right? It always depends on a million things. But it really does. So first of all, it depends on what the student wants to do. If they want to go through a formal process, then, and when I say formal process, that means that they want an investigation to happen, and that means that they want, some sort of resolution in the matter, okay? And that there isn't any sort of stipulation when it comes to Title IX of what that is. Technically, Title IX says that school doesn't even have to sanction or basically punish the person who's found, if they're found responsible. That is up to the school or the college to decide. I can just tell you right off the bat, I think I have either suspended or expelled any student that has been found responsible for a Title IX violation in my life working with college students.
And that's up to you at your discretion.
That's up to the college. Title IX doesn't stipulate that.
See.
Yeah, and so it's the Title IX coordinator, kind of who's oversees the entire process to make sure that the necessary steps are being followed, that everyone is being treated fairly. So that's not only the victim, but it's also the accused, and that both of them have equal access to education. And then the Title IX coordinator makes sure that it was resolved and it was documented. But it's really more of that, it moves kind of from Title IX into the student code realm when it comes to the actual disciplinary action that's taken.
I see. You mentioned some steps that need to be followed closely. Can you just briefly outline what some of those are? Or are they different case by case?
No, the steps are honestly pretty much the same. Regardless of how we all feel about all of the steps, we really don't have much of a choice. We really don't have a choice. The law tells us what to do, and we just manage the process, whether we agree with it or not. And so basically, let's just say a student says that they want a formal investigation. And so then the process begins, and basically we would provide notice, a letter to both the victim and the accused that we're moving forward. And then a trained investigator would interview both of those people, and remember, what they're looking for is only the facts. So they're going to gather facts. They're going to remain completely impartial and unbiased. And then they're going to determine if they need to talk to witnesses and pull them in, and essentially just put a story together of the case, of the facts of the case. And then once that happens, the investigator will write a report, and all of this is pretty standard, honestly. They pretty much tell us what these reports look like and what they should look like, and how we should continue through the process. So they would write a report, and then that report would be provided to the other party involved, and that is different than the regs prior to May 6th. And so it used to be where we didn't have to provide that report because obviously there's confidential information in it. And it's simply, honestly, I've done tons of investigations. It wasn't really necessary, frankly. If I had any questions, I should already have them answered by the time I write the report.
Right.
But it's super important for folks to know that, and we're starting to talk about this and train people on this, that that report does go to both parties involved, including an advisor of their choice. And so there's definitely some confidentiality issues with that. I don't like it. Nobody likes it, but that's the way it is. So we just do our absolute best to help the person the victim, understand that and help them through that. So anyway, after the investigation, then if we're talking about college students, they would actually have to go through a live hearing, which is going to feel more like a courtroom than it is an institution of higher ed type hearing. If it's K through 12, they do not have to do a live hearing, but there is still what's called a decision maker who's going to review the case and ask questions and give both parties an opportunity to respond to those questions. And then that decision maker, either way, college or K through 12, there's a person that's designated to be the decision maker who cannot be the Title IX coordinator. And then they make the decision of responsibility, and then they also decide the remedy. Are there sanctions involved? How do we support the students involved? You know what I mean? And then notice is provided. And I should also point out at the very beginning, we are required to offer supportive measures to the parties involved. And so even if it doesn't go forward with a formal hearing, we would still meet with the students and talk about what we can do to support them in terms of community resources, school resources, maybe a no contact order or whatever that is. So it's just important to note that even though the new Title IX final rule makes it much more legal and less supportive, we can keep it supportive. And that's super, super important for folks to know, which is in all of the trainings right now. So anyone working with Title IX would know that.